Welcome back to LingaCODE Technologies. Today on Satsang, we are going to dive deep, right into the heart of something really, really fundamental, I think, to understanding any complex topic, and that is frameworks. Think of it this way. A framework is like the structure, the skeleton that helps you understand and organize this massive amount of information out there, and to do it in a way that's actually efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for our listeners, you guys are all about getting smart quickly, but also thoroughly, right? So understanding how frameworks work, that's a huge unlock, a kind of cheat code for making sense of the world.
Totally. It's not about, just memorizing every single fact and figure. It's about seeing those connections, the bigger picture. And that's what today's deep dive is all about. We're going to break down piece by piece this really practical framework, the Competency Framework for AI integration in India. And just to be upfront, the insights we're sharing today, they're mainly drawn from a report by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology.
Right. And this framework, it's got real-world teeth. This isn't just some theoretical exercise. Its mission, so to speak, is to give the public sector in India the knowledge, the skills, everything they need to really harness AI, and I mean in practical, impactful ways. It's super new, like March 2025. So today we're going to dig into how it's designed, what it means for how the government works, how it delivers services, the whole shebang. Think of this as your crash course, but a really insightful one on a super important national initiative.
To drive home just how ambitious this whole thing is, let's kick things off with a quote from Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji himself. He said, "India has a double AI advantage, artificial intelligence and aspirational India." Just boom, right there. That sets the scene, doesn't it?
It does. It really highlights, right off the bat, just how much of a national priority this is, this belief in the power of technology, of AI, and how it connects with the ambitions of the people of India itself.
Okay, so let's really get into this. Chapter 1 of the report, it's all about laying the groundwork. And, right away, it's super clear. India is all in on AI. You've got initiatives like the India AI mission, which has some really ambitious goals, things like inclusive growth, better governance, really big stuff.
Absolutely. And it's not just happening domestically either. India is taking the lead globally. A great example of that is the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, the GPAI, which is this big multinational effort to make sure AI develops in a responsible way with humans at the center. And remember the New Delhi declaration from the GPAI summit last December, that really solidified India's position, their commitment to shaping the global AI landscape responsibly.
And this leads to a pretty crucial question, I think, for our listeners. Why this framework? Why now? I mean, what's the urgency behind creating a framework specifically focused on AI competency for the Indian public sector?
Right. That's the key, isn't it? The public sector is going to be central, absolutely central to how AI plays out in India, not just in making policies, but in actually putting AI systems to work, overseeing them, making sure they do what they're supposed to. But here's the thing, right? Reports like the AI Readiness Index from 2023, they've shown us there are some big skill gaps in governments around the world, and especially in what they call the Global South.
So these gaps, you're talking about things like infrastructure for handling data, people with the right skills, just overall readiness to innovate with AI, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And, the South and Central Asia region, they're lagging behind in terms of preparedness, and that's a big deal.
So are we saying the whole point of this framework, the core purpose, is to tackle those gaps head on, specifically in the Indian context?
Exactly. It's like a targeted strike. It's about building that foundation, that understanding of AI among all these public officials. And a huge emphasis here, a massive one, is on the ethics of AI. What are the right ways to do this? Where are the potential pitfalls? The framework wants to pinpoint exactly where those skills are lacking and create a structure for training, even career paths within the government, all focused on AI.
This is a very practical approach. Yeah. So what exactly are we hoping to achieve? If I'm a public official, what should I be able to do to understand because of this framework?
So the framework, it sets out a few key goals. Right. Number one, officials need a grasp of the basics. How does this AI stuff actually work? And what can't it do? What are its limits? Second, it clearly defines what skills are needed, and it does this across 3 different dimensions: behavioral, functional, and then those specific to different sectors. And then third, it's about being ahead of the curve, knowing what new AI technologies are coming down the pipeline and how those might change the way the government delivers services, everything from healthcare to transportation, you name it.
Okay, so it's like a 3-pronged attack.
Yeah.
Understanding the tech, defining the skills needed, and then having that future-focused lens, right? What else is in there?
It also wants to help officials identify opportunities. Where can we use AI to make these public services better, more efficient, more effective? It's about empowering them to make smarter policy decisions about AI and to oversee how it's used effectively, ethically. And we talked about this. It's really focused on finding those skill gaps so that training programs can be developed, like super targeted training. And finally, it even helps to create career paths within the public sector for those who want to work with AI to kind of build a career around it. And it sets standards for how to evaluate performance.
That sounds incredibly comprehensive, really forward-thinking. Now, how is this all structured? If I'm reading the ministry's report, what's the roadmap here? How do I make sense of all these pieces?
Okay, so the report, it's laid out in a pretty logical way, and we're going to follow that same structure in our conversation. You start with an introduction, right? The scene setter, highlighting how AI is becoming so important for the public sector. Then you've got what they call the AI primer. This is all about building those foundational blocks, giving everyone that baseline knowledge of what we're even talking about. Then that leads naturally into here's the competency framework itself, how it's designed, its aims, and then the bulk of it, you dive into the nitty-gritty, the behavioral competencies, functional, and domain-specific. And finally, it wraps up with conclusions and recommendations. What they learn. What should the government do next?
All right, so let's jump right into Chapter 2, Demystifying AI, because, for a lot of people, AI, it still conjures up images of robots and science fiction movies. How does the report actually break this down in a way that makes sense, in a way that's relevant for public officials who, might not be tech experts?
Well, they start with a clear, no-nonsense definition of AI. It's from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and they define AI as a machine-based system that, for a given set of human-defined objectives, uses input to generate outputs such as predictions, recommendations, or decisions. So it's about practicality, AI taking information, processing it, and spitting out some kind of result based on goals we set.
So it's like, at its core, AI is taking in info, processing it based on some rules, and then giving us an output. Can you give us a real-world example here, something people can really picture?
Sure. Think about a system, one that recognizes objects and images. You give it a picture, that's the input, right? Just the raw data, pixels and all that. This data gets fed into these models, algorithms, often things like neural networks, which analyze the picture. They look for patterns, shapes, all of that. And the output, the system tells you, hey, there's a cat in this picture, or this is a dog, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes it much clearer, thanks. The report also talks about explicit and implicit objectives in AI systems. What's the difference there?
So explicit objectives, those are the ones that are directly programmed in. Like think of a navigation app, right? The explicit objective is to find the fastest route from A to B. It's built that way. But then you've got implicit objectives. These aren't directly coded in, but the AI kind of picks them up over time, by analyzing loads of data or learning from rules. For example, a self-driving car, it's programmed to follow traffic laws. That's explicit. But the big implicit objective, to keep everyone safe, the people in the car, pedestrians, everyone, it's learned, not directly programmed.
Right, so it's like the overall goal that kind of emerges from all the explicit instructions.
Yeah, like take those big language models, the ones that write text. They learn to generate coherent text, stuff that makes sense in context, by analyzing tons and tons of human language. It's this implicit objective they pick up through all that learning.
Now, AI is a pretty vast field, right? You've got all these different areas of specialization. Which ones does the report highlight as being particularly relevant for the public sector in India?
It focuses on a few key areas. The first one is machine learning, or ML. Basically, it's about computers learning and getting better at a task through experience without having to be explicitly programmed for every little detail. And within machine learning, you've got three main types. Supervised learning, that's where the system learns from labeled data. Think of it like predicting if someone's going to default on a loan or recognizing images. You've got unsupervised learning, where the system finds patterns in data that isn't labeled. That's more like what happens in those e-commerce recommendation engines or in natural language processing. And then there's reinforcement learning. That's where the system learns by trial and error, like figuring out what actions lead to the best outcomes, which is how they train self-driving cars.
So machine learning is kind of the backbone of how AI learns from data then. What else is there?
You've got deep learning. That's where things get really complex. Think of it like artificial neural networks inspired by the human brain with multiple layers all interconnected. These deep networks, they're really good at finding subtle patterns in massive data sets, all kinds of data. And the great thing about deep learning is it can handle unstructured data, like images and text, without us having to spoon feed it every little detail. It figures a lot out on its own. This makes it super valuable in healthcare, for things like analyzing medical images, and also for stuff like fraud detection.
Okay, so deep learning helps AI handle tougher problems, deal with more complex data. What else are we talking about here?
Then we've got natural language processing, or NLP. That's all about making computers understand human language, being able to interpret what we say, even generate text that sounds like us. That's the tech behind those chatbots that answer your questions, or those translation systems that convert text from one language to another. Then you've got computer vision. That's basically giving computers the ability to see and understand images and videos. So things like classifying images, spotting defects on an assembly line, even helping those self-driving cars navigate the world. And then lastly, the report talks about generative AI. That's the really cool stuff. Think of AI models that learn patterns from huge data sets like text, images, even audio and code, and then they can generate brand new content that's similar to what they learned from.
It's amazing how specialized AI has become. The report then dives into real-world examples, how AI is actually being used right now in the Indian public sector. Can you share some of those with us?
Oh yeah, there's some great examples. You've got Pashini, the National Language Translation Mission, that uses AI and NLP to make information accessible in all these different Indian languages. It's a huge accessibility win. Then there's SIA, this AI-powered software used by the State Bank of India. It handles millions of customer queries every day, giving people quick answers. In the world of finance, ICICI Bank is using AI to detect fraud, before it happens, which helps them recover more loans. In agriculture, there's the National Pest Surveillance System that uses AI to predict and prevent outbreaks, protecting crops. Krishi 24/7, that's an automated news monitoring system for agriculture, scanning sources in multiple languages to keep everyone informed. Then, for those big infrastructure projects, there's the NHAI AI-based face recognition system that helps manage projects better by keeping track of workers. And an AI-based RBIS used by the Pension Distribution Office that's making pension payments smoother and more accurate. Then you've got the GeoAgro iKrishi system. That gives farmers personalized advice tailored to their specific location. And even for little kids, there's Jadwi Patara. That's an educational platform that uses AI to make learning fun and engaging.
Wow, that's a really impressive range of applications. It really shows the tangible benefits AI is already bringing to all these different aspects of government and public services. But, it's important to be realistic. AI is powerful, but it has limitations.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges, the potential pitfalls that public officials really need to be aware of?
Right. It's not all sunshine and roses, right? The report gets into some of the harder stuff. One big challenge is something they call the black box problem. It's this idea that sometimes with complex AI systems, especially the ones using deep learning, it's really hard to understand why they make the decisions they do. The AI gives you an answer, but the reasoning behind it, that's hidden.
So it's like the AI spits out a decision, but we don't always know what logic led to it?
Exactly. And that makes it hard to trust the AI, to hold it accountable. Like, imagine a citizen is denied a government service based on what an AI decides, but no one can really explain why. That's a problem. Then there's the issue of data biases and algorithmic fairness. AI systems, they learn from the data we feed them. If that data has biases, if it doesn't represent everyone equally, then the AI can end up being biased too, leading to unfair decisions. The report mentions studies that found gender bias in medical imaging datasets and how AI models trained on data from one place might not work so well in another place where people are different or the context is different.
So garbage in, garbage out, right? The quality of the data, making sure it's representative, that's super important to avoid unfair outcomes.
Totally. And the report also touches on some other technical challenges, things like generalization. When an AI trained on one set of data doesn't perform well with new data it hasn't seen before. Or underfitting, where the AI model is too simple to really capture the patterns in the data. And then there's overfitting, where it learns the training data too well, even the mistakes in it, and then it messes up when it sees new data. But beyond all of that, the report really hammers home this one big point: the importance of the human factor, human oversight, being able to critically evaluate what the AI is doing, collaboration between different experts. All of that is essential to make sure AI is used ethically, effectively. It's a tool, it's here to help us, to augment what we do, not to replace human judgment, which is still vital.
That makes sense, yeah. So to make sure we're using AI responsibly, are there specific principles, guidelines that the report talks about?
Yeah, they introduce these principles for responsible management of AI systems. Think of it like a moral compass for using AI. They cover things like safety and reliability, making sure the systems are dependable, equality, inclusivity, and non-discrimination, making sure everyone benefits. Privacy and security of data, super important, right? Transparency, so we know how these systems work. Accountability, so someone's responsible for what the AI does. And overall, the need to protect and reinforce positive human values, making sure AI is used for good.
Those principles sound incredibly important for guiding ethical AI use in the government. And for those who want to learn more, does the report point to any resources?
Absolutely. It mentions things like certification programs, online courses, all kinds of stuff specifically for public officials. They can learn about the latest AI techniques, computer vision, really get a solid grasp of how it all works, especially when it comes to ethical considerations.
Fantastic. Now, Chapter 3 gets into the heart of the framework itself, the Artificial Intelligence Competency Framework. And, we understand it's all about enhancing how people understand AI and make sure it's used ethically. Can you walk us through the structure of this framework, how it's actually designed?
Right. So the framework is all about building those AI-related skills and making sure AI is used for good, but in a really structured way. It sets out specific behavioral competencies, functional competences, and domain-specific competencies. And all of these are aligned with the different stages of an AI project from start to finish. Now, a key first step in creating this framework was understanding how AI projects work, mapping out the different phases, and then figuring out all the different roles public officials play at different levels of government, both central and state.
So it's about knowing where those different roles intersect with an AI project at each stage.
Yeah, exactly. And then they categorize public sector officials into 3 levels: senior or level 1, then mid-level or level 2, and junior or level 3. And this applies across the board, to ministries, union territories, and public sector undertakings. The idea is that these different levels have different responsibilities, different expertise when it comes to AI, and that's important for tailoring the training programs, the skills development.
And how do these levels or these roles connect with the actual work of an AI project, as it moves through those different phases?
Yeah. Okay, so the report breaks down the responsibilities for each level at each stage of the AI lifecycle. They define the key stages as planning and design, development and deployment, and implementation and monitoring. For example, let's say we're in the planning and design phase. A level 1 official, someone senior, they're likely the one defining the overall need for the project, setting the budget, and approving the selection of a vendor, the company providing the AI solution. A level 2 official, someone in the middle, they're probably doing the research, setting the criteria for evaluating different solutions, and drafting the request for proposals, the RFP. And then a level 3 official, maybe someone junior, they're assisting with contacting vendors, making sure everyone gets the RFP, that kind of stuff. So it's a very clear breakdown of how the framework is meant to work in practice.
That's a really helpful explanation. Thank you. Now, Chapter 4 delves into behavioral competencies. Can you explain what those are and why they're so important when it comes to integrating AI?
So behavioral competencies are basically the ways people should behave, the attitudes and approaches they should have when they're dealing with AI, especially in a public sector context. They're as important as technical skills because, how people approach problems, how they collaborate, their ethical considerations, that all shapes how well AI gets integrated and used. And the framework divides these competencies into 2 main categories: core competencies, which everyone needs, regardless of their specific role, and leadership competencies, which are more for those in charge of AI projects and teams.
So let's start with the core behavioral competencies. Which ones does the framework highlight, and how do they connect with using AI in government?
Okay, so one big one is innovative thinking. Being open to new ideas, being proactive in finding ways to use AI to solve problems and make things better. Then there's systems thinking. That's about understanding how everything's connected. When you're implementing an AI solution in a complex system like the government, you can't just think about one piece in isolation. And continuous learning, well, that's crucial, right? AI is constantly changing, evolving, so officials need to stay updated on what's happening in their field, the new technologies, the latest applications.
Yeah, those are all super important, especially in a field as fast-moving as AI. What else is in there?
Adaptability and change management, that's another big one. Being flexible, being able to adjust plans when things change, because with AI projects, things are going to change. Collaboration and communication. Super important for working effectively with others, both within the government and with the public. You've got to be able to talk to people, explain what you're doing, why it matters. Then you have citizen centricity and a people-first approach. That's all about putting citizens at the center, making sure AI is used to benefit everyone, especially those who are marginalized or disadvantaged. And of course, integrity and accountability. That's about using AI ethically, openly, fairly, and transparently. It's about being honest and responsible, the core values of public service.
These core competencies really lay the groundwork for responsible AI work. What about the leadership behavioral competencies? What sets them apart? What do they focus on?
So leadership competencies, as the name suggests, these are geared towards those who are leading AI initiatives. One important one is outcome orientation and result orientation. It's not enough to just implement AI. You have to make sure it actually leads to positive changes, tangible improvements for people's lives. Team leadership and leading others, that's about building and managing diverse teams, people with different skills and backgrounds, and making sure they work well together. Then you've got initiative and drive. Leaders need to be proactive to see where AI can be useful and champion those ideas, take charge.
It sounds like leadership in AI is about vision, but also about getting things done, real results. What else is in that leadership bucket?
Decision-making is a big one. Leaders need to weigh the pros and cons of AI, understand the risks, and make informed decisions based on evidence, expert advice, and input from different stakeholders. And then lastly, there's trust and delegation. Good leaders empower their teams, they trust them to do their jobs well, and they give them the space to use their expertise in these AI projects.
It's really interesting to see how much emphasis is placed on these behavioral aspects alongside the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, does the framework also outline any support for developing these competencies, training or programs for public officials?
Yes, it does. It specifically mentions support programs and targeted training initiatives designed to help officials develop these behavioral competencies. Things like introductory courses on emerging technologies, training in problem solving and decision making, and leadership development programs.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's move on to Chapter 5, which focuses on functional competencies. It sounds like we're getting into the more technical skills here, right? What are some of the key ones identified in the framework?
Yeah, these are the specific skills you need to actually work with and integrate AI. A really foundational one is AI literacy. And that doesn't just mean knowing what AI is. It's about a deeper understanding of its core concepts, its capabilities, and its limitations, and also how AI affects society. Public officials need this literacy to make smart decisions about when and how to use AI. This includes things like understanding machine learning, deep learning, algorithms, data analytics, all those foundational pieces.
So it's about giving officials a solid working knowledge of AI, how it works, and its impact. What other functional competencies are highlighted?
Public procurement for AI solutions, that's another critical area. It's about knowing how to buy AI-powered products and services for the government, making sure those systems are ethical and unbiased, and working with different tech companies. And, one interesting thing the report points out is that right now, the general financial rules, the GFR, they don't have specific guidelines for AI procurement. So that might be something to work on, developing those guidelines.
It's almost like the way we buy things for the government needs to adapt to the unique nature of AI, right? What other competencies are considered essential?
Understanding AI policy architecture is really important. That's about knowing the rules, regulations, and guidelines that govern how AI is developed and used, making sure everything's done legally and ethically. Then there's data management, which is everything involved in handling data for AI, collecting it, storing it, processing it, sharing it. And there's a strong focus on data quality and ethics here. The report mentions some key government platforms for sharing data, things like the Open Government Data Platform, the National Data and Analytics Platform, the India Urban Data Exchange, and this new platform they're working on, the India AI Datasets Platform.
It seems like data is at the heart of AI, so those data management skills are really critical.
Absolutely, and very closely tied to that is data governance. This competency is about creating and implementing the frameworks and policies that control how data is used in AI, making sure it's secure, private, and used ethically. And the report talks about some key initiatives here, like the National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy and the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Then we have data analytics, which is the skill of analyzing data, understanding what it means, and using those insights to inform AI-driven decisions. And the government has the Center for Excellence for Data Analytics, CEDA, which is a key resource in this area.
So data really seems to be a huge part of the functional skills needed for AI integration. Are there other areas the framework addresses?
Yeah, for sure. Financial management for AI projects is important. It's about understanding the costs involved in building and using AI, what drives those costs, and how to manage the risks. AI project management, that's about effectively running AI projects, combining classic project management methods with knowledge specific to AI. And then AI stakeholder engagement management, that's about working with all the different groups involved. Other government agencies, citizens, companies, researchers, and making sure everyone's on the same page. Building trust and ensuring responsible use of AI, that comes through good stakeholder engagement.
That's a very comprehensive set of functional competencies, from the basics of AI to the practical skills of implementation and stakeholder management. And like those behavioral competencies, are there support systems in place to help public officials build these skills?
Absolutely. The report mentions support structures and specific training programs to help officials develop these essential functional competencies in AI. So they're not left hanging, they'll get the support they need to build those skills.
Okay, great. So now we're at chapter 6, which is all about domain competencies. This is where we get really specific, looking at AI in different sectors of government. Which sectors does the report focus on?
The report zeroes in on 5 key sectors: agriculture, healthcare, education, smart cities and infrastructure, and smart mobility. These are areas where AI can really make a difference, really transform how things work in India. And for each of these sectors, the framework lays out the specialized knowledge and expertise that government officials need to effectively use AI.
So let's take these one by one. Starting with agriculture, what kind of domain-specific knowledge do officials need to have?
So they need a deep understanding of the agricultural landscape in India, its challenges, things like dependence on the monsoon, unsustainable practices, the need to feed a huge population, all of that. They need to know how AI and other technologies like IoT, the Internet of Things, and remote sensing, how those can be used to solve those challenges. Things like precision farming, real-time alerts for farmers, and recommendations tailored to specific farms. And the report highlights some cool initiatives like the Kisan e-Mitra chatbot, which gives farmers information and advice, and the National Pest Surveillance System, which helps prevent crop damage. And it's really important for officials to consider the impact of AI on farmers, especially small farmers and those who might be marginalized, making sure AI benefits everyone.
It's like a mix of understanding agriculture itself, knowing the AI tools that can help, and thinking about the bigger picture, how it impacts the whole community. What about healthcare? What kind of domain-specific knowledge is needed there?
In healthcare, officials need to grasp the complexities of the Indian healthcare system. It's a fragmented system, and there's a huge burden of disease. They need to see how AI can be a game changer in things like diagnostics, making consultations more efficient, improving community health, even predicting disease outbreaks and how patients will respond to treatment. And there are some big initiatives happening here, like the Ayushman Bharat digital mission, which is all about creating a digital health ecosystem, and the eSanjeevani platform for telemedicine. A really crucial thing here is knowing how to handle sensitive data ethically, patient data, and ensuring it's secure and used responsibly. And of course, they need to collaborate with healthcare professionals, understand the regulations, and also help train frontline healthcare workers to use these AI systems effectively.
Makes sense, given how sensitive health information is, that ethical considerations and data privacy are front and center. What about the education sector? What knowledge do officials need to have there?
When it comes to education, they need to be aware of the challenges, the problems in the system. Things like unequal access to quality education, not enough good teachers. And they need to see how AI can help bridge those gaps through things like personalized learning, where each student gets a customized learning experience, automating administrative tasks for teachers so they can focus on teaching, and identifying those learning gaps so we can help students who are falling behind. And there are some great initiatives already happening, like the AI for All program, and incorporating AI concepts into the insert curriculum. But the key thing here is making sure these AI solutions are inclusive, that they benefit all learners, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds.
It's not just about bringing tech into the classroom. It's about using AI to make education better and fairer for everyone. Now, what about smart cities and infrastructure? What kind of knowledge is needed in that domain?
For smart cities, officials need a strong grasp of urban planning, how to manage these complex urban environments, and they should be familiar with the big national missions, things like the Smart Cities Mission and the ADL Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, or AMU. We need to understand how AI can make cities better, Things like improving urban planning, managing resources more efficiently, like water and energy, and delivering better services to citizens. Key areas of knowledge include data governance for urban data, making sure AI-powered infrastructure is secure and sustainable, and prioritizing inclusivity and accessibility for all residents.
So it's about using AI to make our cities more livable, efficient, and sustainable. Finally, what about smart mobility? What kind of knowledge do officials need in that sector?
For smart mobility, they need to understand the challenges in transportation, things like traffic jams, accidents, and inefficiencies in how we move goods. They need to know how AI can tackle these problems, through things like optimizing traffic flow, using predictive analytics to prevent accidents, and making logistics and supply chains smoother. And there are some really cool examples in India, like AI-based traffic management systems in cities like Kerala, Bengaluru, and Delhi, and projects like Telangana's IRAST initiative, which is all about road safety. The Kerala State Road Transport Corporation is even using AI for safety systems. So key knowledge areas here include a deep understanding of the transportation sector, familiarity with the specific AI technologies used in mobility, expertise in data governance for transportation data, and strong stakeholder management skills, being able to work with different groups, from tech companies to transportation authorities. And of course, all of this needs to be aligned with the government's overall goals for the transport sector.
Wow, it's really fascinating to see how diverse the applications of AI are across these different sectors, and the emphasis on domain-specific knowledge that really shows that you can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach with AI. You have to understand the nuances of each sector to use it effectively.
Okay, Chapter 7 brings us to the conclusion and recommendations of the report. What are some of the key takeaways here, the practical steps the report suggests for the Indian government?
Well, the report really drives home the point that this AI competency framework is crucial for empowering the public sector in India, for making sure they can integrate AI effectively. And then it makes a bunch of recommendations, really practical steps for implementation and good governance of AI. For foundation and governance, they recommend setting up an AI governance board. This board would review and authorize AI applications across the government, making sure they align with the guidelines and addressing those ethical and societal considerations. And they also suggest creating an AI ethics committee, which would focus on weaving ethical principles into every stage of AI projects. So having that strong oversight, those ethical guidelines in place, those are really seen as essential for a responsible AI use in the government. What other recommendations does the report make?
It emphasizes the need to standardize AI risk management across the government, create a solid framework for identifying, evaluating, and mitigating those risks that come with AI. This framework would include a standardized way to assess risks and a system for publicly disclosing details about government AI projects, so there's transparency. In terms of privacy and data management, which is obviously huge, they recommend building privacy protections into the design of AI systems, especially the ones handling sensitive data. Using this privacy by design approach, regular privacy impact assessments are also recommended. And they suggest creating dedicated data governance units within each ministry to oversee how data is managed throughout its life cycle, securely and efficiently.
Those privacy and data governance recommendations are really critical for building trust with the public, especially with all. It's definitely something worth watching closely. It seems like India has the potential to become a real leader in AI, not just in terms of the technology itself, but also in terms of how it's developed ethically and inclusively.
Absolutely, and that's what makes it so exciting. It's a story that's still being written, and it could shape the future of AI, not just for India, but for the whole world.
This has been a really insightful deep dive into the world of AI in India. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
And for our listeners who want to learn more, we'll be sharing links to the full report and other resources in the show notes.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating read.
All right, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.